activate the king. That's terrible writing. Man, I gotta work on that.
I still think that.
I'm sorry, what?
So there's this thing about bad books. There was a study done. I'll have to get the exact study from my friend Mike Parrott, but they did a study on
bad books,
like on damaged books versus non-damaged textbooks, and they found that people ended up having better retention of the material from the damaged books. And the theory is that it had to do with the extra effort placed into having to work within the book to like physically. So like
that's it.
And anyway, I think your bad handwriting
more telekinetic or more kinesthetic experience led to better retention. That kind of makes sense, actually.
Yeah, and I think that your handwriting. I think your handwriting helps in the same way. But there it is. So
nice. There's this similar thing where if you ask people to help you with little minor things, they tend to like you more. Like even borrowing a pencil or giving you directions, whatever.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I picked up. I actually.
Have you got a match? What?
That's something I actually remember vividly picking up on early. Is I would ask like pretty basic, like what I was. It's actually philosophy that I still talk about to this day. Is if I don't ever ask, I have no expectation of what that response will necessarily be. I can't and that's always been something I've felt and said. And my point to that is, so I would ask on the most basic of things, and I found that to be true. People just naturally start to want to talk to you more when you do things like that. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to go at Mandy Boyd. We're going to go at, I'm going to go at,
I'll tell you.
Who else?
Steve might enjoy it.
Who?
Steve Blasius. Blaisus. He used to play chess way back when. In fact, one winter, a whole bunch of us got into chess in a big way. Like a bunch of us. We're not nervous of that too, right? Once springs are on, then you want to get out of the house.
And we'll do one more here. We'll do Steve Blasius. Also, I'm going to the comments here. I'm tagging a couple, and then we'll start on it. I saw Blasius. How do you spell that last name?
Blasius.
Yeah, it's not. Oh, I know why it's not popping up.
Heather's outfit.
I know why. Well, because I was commenting with my name instead of the manumission.
Oh, interesting. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's still not letting me get them as a manumission page. That's weird. Anyway, okay, so we have some, start tagging some people, whoever hops on. But do you want to go ahead and explain the metaphor?
Sure. The basic idea of activating the king is actually advice from chess. And I've got a couple boards here that show it. This little arrow here and this little ring around the Black Knight, these show you the two most recent moves on these. And these both, the one on the left is actually from, I played the computer chess just for fun. And I just picked this from a game that I played a while ago. And the very next move here is going to be this guy getting his king involved, because as soon as the rook comes over, he kind of gets in trouble.
Yeah.
But you can see that my king is kind of just off over by himself. He's not really helping anything out. Like, this is not a good example of activating the king. On the other hand, the game over here on the right, and this game on the right, I don't know who this Reykjavik guy is, but we got a couple names here. We got the blue too. Maybe wants to play around and chase it down. But you can see the white king is right in the middle of everything, and the king has control of all the squares around him.
Yep.
And so this is kind of the king's territory. So when he walks around the board, he just sort of commands it.
Yeah.
And so he can support other pieces, and the king can capture other pieces. And although he's vulnerable, he's also kind of powerful because he completely owns that space.
Yeah, he can capture and carry
example,
to a certain extent, right?
What?
Kind of, he can capture. He can kind of capture and also carry other pieces, make other pieces a bit more powerful just with his presence there, right?
Well, they can all do that, but the king makes a giant block. Like the knight is kind of porous.
Yeah.
You see the yellow circles of the knight?
Yep.
How anything can just sort of like zip on through, and that's why the knight it's useful in its way. That's why the knights come out early, because they can sneak in and they can't be blocked. But they also don't really block anything the way the king can just sort of make a block.
Yeah.
Similarly, pawns capture diagonally. So these black pawns similarly have a giant block. Like they own this space.
Yeah.
Just like the king can own his space. But this idea of activating the king, if you overlook that, you're missing a real chance with your chess game. The king isn't usually one you want to bring out early. Like usually it's the bishops and the knights running around, interacting with the pawns and making the walls and the fortresses.
Yeah.
And then the rooks and the queen and the king comes later when things start to thin out a little bit. When the rest of the field has been, the cavalry is already wiped out and half the infantry is gone.
Well, almost. You kind of want to wait for some of the strategy to be revealed also, right? That might be a reason you wait a little bit later to bring it out. Would that be fair to say? Like you want to see?
For sure. But notice that, like this black king, it's a for the king, right? If you bring him out to fight, he can get zapped, but he's also a powerful fighter in his own right. Like this black king on the right, all he's doing is supporting this pawn. That's his whole job in this particular situation, right? If now that the knight's out of the way, maybe we'll bring the king up and he supports both pawns, or maybe he'll come over here and start supporting these other guys. The point is that the king is a fighting piece. Now, not just a show pony. He's like the original idea of the king, going back to King Gilgamesh, is that the king is the guy who's the main guard.
Yeah.
Like that was the original idea of the king, was the big guy in town.
Almost like a shepherd. Like the king was kind of like a shepherd over a flock, right?
Well, that was the original idea. Yeah, this idea that you're supposed to do what the king says, and he can just abuse you. That's kind of a modern painting. Way back when, guys got to be king by serving their community as a protector.
Yeah.
And then naturally it became, well, as long as I'm protecting you guys, why don't you guys make me some nice weapons and feed me? And that's maybe that's kind of the origin of the original power structures. Have you ever seen the original Indian version of chess?
I have not.
It's the weird in the original Indian version of chess, the knights are replaced by these elephants, and there's this little section of 9 squares, and their board has the intersections being the spots of action, right?
Wow.
And the original,
I like that.
This little 9, yeah, and the board was it was asymmetrical. It had, I think, 7 or 9, I'm not sure. But it had this little courtyard thing, this little 9 square zone, and the king could never leave that courtyard.
Wow.
They called it the king's court. So if you can trap him in the corner of the court, you don't have to actually chase him all over the whole board. So yeah, if the king is
because he couldn't leave the court. Because he was a protector. I see. So that, yeah, I like that.
Because that was his castle, right? Outside of his castle, he's just a schmuck.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So, if you can pull him here, he's not allowed to escape to the rest of the board like you can in modern versions of chess. The other weird thing in the original version of chess is that the queen could only move the same way as the king. In other words, she could move any direction, but she only moved one spot. And in some versions, the bishops are the same way. Bishops move diagonally, right?
Yeah.
So this guy can go here, or here, or here, or if all these pieces weren't on the way down here. In the original Indian version, the bishops were like the super pawn where they could only also move one spot. So the queen and the bishops kind of ran around like a little gang. That was like the effective strategy back then.
I see.
And of course, the bishop, they're named after these religious leaders, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's, yeah.
And when bishops line up,
go ahead. Bishops line up together.
Anyway, so that's the metaphor. That's activate the king.
Well,
but you had some ideas about.
I have some ideas that are just out there, and one of them, is kind of a combination. It has to do with our Paul series, and Paul essentially is writing a dissenting Supreme Court opinion on the execution, crucifixion, and ruling of Jesus Christ. Now, this wouldn't be of any significance except for the fact that in the 40s, I believe it was, Israel was reformed and is now an official and has been an official, non-messianic Jewish state. So this is a ruling on the books, and thus the question at the heart of it is.
You're talking about 1947?
Yeah, I believe so.
When Israel was founded?
Yep. So basically, we have a ruling on the books that could potentially place a king, a living king, on the board named Jesus Christ. In my opinion, if there were a rule, if the majority opinion became Paul's dissent, because the reason, what's that?
Does this connect back to your idea of the empty chair?
Yes. I think we're on a delay.
Perhaps. It was being kind of nasty earlier, too. You actually sound a lot better than you did earlier, but that just might be my end.
But basically, it's the empty chair philosophy. And really, for me, I was mentioning to you beforehand, my argument from a secular perspective to the secular atheistic community is this. I mean, if all we have is our time period we're here, wouldn't you want to be part of the time period that just wanted to see what happens by activating this king figure that's been kind of the elephant in the room for 2,000 plus years and just see what happens? Because what's the probability of that even being an opportunity to legally recognize a perceived living king by billions of people who was allegedly ascended after death and risen? I mean, and by all accounts has a very Buddhist-like moral law that is kind of transcendent from the moral law we've had. So there's reason to do it, but all of those reasons, put those away. Wouldn't it just be fun to see what happens? Activate the king?
Maybe. But if we go back to this notion, like the idea that Jesus is like your shield, right?
Yeah.
Right. One of the ideas is that Jesus shields you from God's wrath.
Yeah.
Right.
I believe, shields you from God's wrath, but actually serves as a bridge back into God's kind of garden or forgiveness, essentially. Shields you from judgment. There you go. Yeah.
It's a bridge to acceptance. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Here's what's weird to me. A big part of the Christian tradition is that any individual can take this up on their own.
Yep.
Like when you use the metaphor, activate the king, that's like, accept the king.
Yeah. Well, so there's this parable. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let me play. I don't know if this is devil's advocate. Why do we care what Israel thinks?
I can explain that, and I'll tell you exactly why. It actually is a relationship between two things from Jesus's walk, and I'll go over them briefly. Thing one, when Jesus was in his walk, he goes upon a town, and he performs these miracles, and the town is so scared and so blown away by these miracles that they're like, go away. I don't even care if you're the Son of God. Just leave. And Jesus listens. For me, it's the scariest part of the Bible. It says that even like that Jesus will listen to you if you push him away. So that's thing one. And then thing two is the prodigal son. And the prodigal son, at the end of the parable, concludes with the older brother, who I interpret to be the Jewish brothers, the Hebrews. The older brother has grown resentful toward the father. And if you read the prodigal son, the younger brother, who I perceive to be the Gentiles, they were just immediately resentful towards the father and spoiling their inheritance. But the Hebrews, or the older brother, they kept their word. So when the Gentiles get theirs restored, or when the younger brother, the older brother grows resentful. And what you realize at that point is that the older brother is about to restart the entire parable. He's at the beginning of the prodigal son. The older brother is growing resentful, judgmental. He's not entering the house to talk to the father. The only next step is to demand his inheritance and leave, just like the younger brother already did. And so my perception of this is that the Gentiles should be going out into the field to help the older brother repent and turn back. And that's why I believe Israel plays a role, is because they're the resentful older brother, in my opinion, of the prodigal son. And thus, if they were to...
That's a really cool parallel.
Wild, right?
The lesson of the prodigal son is about trusting in the love of the Father.
Well, that's the perceived lesson. And it is about that. But I believe the prodigal son is actually a call to action.